Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right, we're talking Scream on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from Woodsboro High. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest of details of 1996's seminal Scream in the hopes that a young high school student's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes that we can make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust that if we pop in a movie with just a girl with big boobs who's always running up the stairs when she should be heading out the door, she'll point it out for me. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm good, but I'm disappointed that you didn't say, the death of the Fonz is where, where we can start making fun, when we start making fun of them.
I don't plan these things ahead. Strangely enough, I've never written these things down. It's always whatever occurs to me in the moment. And I do. This is a question I have for you, Gina, before we get into Scream at all. But for us, when you saw Henry Winkler pop up on a movie screen, you're like, I haven't seen that gentleman in quite some time. He is in amber, the Fonz to me. But I don't think that anyone of a younger generation has that fossilized idea of him. He's more ubiquitous than that now.
He's like one of those America's Dad types, kind of like a almost version on a Tom Hanks type, where he's just so lovable and apparently is an absolute gem of a human being in real life, and he seems to be very comfortable playing somewhat foolish looking characters. Yeah. And which is always a good way to endear the audience to you.
Yes, he's brave. I think he embraced his second act so well that people are like, we never want you to go away ever again. Whenever you want to pop up, wherever it happens, please, we just enjoy your presence. So when he looks in the mirror and combs his hair back with his hand. I mean, I don't think anyone half our age would look at that and go, oh, that's a funny joke, because they would not have the reference to it. And yet it still works for the character.
Oh, it totally does. Yeah. Cause he's hapless and of course he's going to be, referencing stuff that, no high school student at that time would care about because he's like their dad.
Yes.
and he alternately tries to be both stern and loving at the same time.
Oh my God. When he cups Sydney's face, I cringed to the point that I looked like that house in Poltergeist. I just collapsed in on myself.
he's waving the scissors around at the end.
Oh my God. I mean, it's brilliant. There's a lot of, we might get dinged, but there's a lot to praise in this motion picture. We've handled movies that we adore, and I would say even quite a few that we would hold up as absolute true classics. And here we're treading into territory where I don't find a ton of fault in this. And not that making fun of a movie requires you to find fault, but also it's not full of the goofiest of details. There's one or two that pop out, but it's not exactly a goof fest for us.
No, and I, as much as this become a cliche in and of itself, I think it did certainly mark a turning point in horror. Yeah. The early to mid 90s for horror was pretty fucking dire. and you were getting a lot of straight to cable stuff, which was, not particularly good because everybody thought that, at that point the horror was just all, gore and boobs.
Or you had the stuff that we covered with Wolf and one of your favorites, Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Right. The classy stuff.
Classy. Yeah. This isn't your son and daughter's horror. This is for adults. We're going to do adult things here.
And certainly I would say I would categorize this along with I would say this counts as a horror comedy. Not quite as overt as American Werewolf in London, which is another favorite of mine, but it is certainly, obviously, I'm not making any bold insight here. It's very self-aware.
Yeah.
But not in a way that suggests that the people making this movie think the horror is stupid.
No. I think that is those sort of one of those Hollywood always learns the wrong lesson situations that happens after Scream.
Right.
But within the universe of Scream, they absolutely take the horror seriously. And it doesn't stop them from having characters make witty lines.
Right. It's a satire, but it's still a competently made movie at the same time. You're not talking like a Sharknado,
right?
In which they're going out of their way for it to be as dumb as hell.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit. We've started this entry point, but I think it all kind of comes back to Kevin Williamson, because he's the person who sort of conceives of the donut here, and it's Wes Craven who makes it. But there are sort of two stories that Williamson points to as the impetus for this. The first one I remember from the director's commentary of Scream, which I first had on VHS, because this movie came out in a 2 VHS set that you could buy in a decorative plexi plastic box that had the actual movie and then one with the director's commentary on it. And I'm like, oh, this is everything I've ever wanted. Now I can have director's commentaries from Laserdisc, because what I have them on VHS.
It'll never get any better than this.
No, it was all downhill from there in terms of technology. Purchased on the Universal City Walk because I was working at Universal Hollywood at the time. And I pored over it like I was obsessed with it. And the story he tells in that one is I was at a pub quiz. They were doing horror trivia. They asked who is the killer, the original killer in the first Friday the 13th. And I was the only one who knew it was Mrs. Voorhees. And that gave me the idea of, if I'm this aware of horror movies, what would happen in that type of horror movie with characters who knew them as well as I did, or at least had an awareness of them. The second one is a deeper cut, and that is from a guy by the name of Danny Rolling, who was also known as the Gainesville Ripper, who actually did murder multiple people in a rather disturbing fashion. And I won't go over those details because they are supremely disturbing. And honestly, it has very little to do with the final product of the film, other than the fact that he felt like there hadn't been a movie that had incorporated slasher elements in quite some time. It had just gone out of favor and out of fashion. But what if you did one well? What would happen?
Well, it's a rare slasher movie that kind of focuses on, fear kind of overtaking the town. Whereas in most movies, it's a very, enclosed area. You got a campground. You got, two houses directly across the street from each other.
Right.
But this, like, a whole town is being impacted by this. And also while recovering from another murder like the year prior.
Right.
Did you see this in the theater?
I did. Again, on Universal City Walk. The weekend it opened, I don't believe on Friday night, but I believe on Saturday. I went with a group of other studio guides because I was still a studio guide at that point. And I went into it with just like, well, this looks fun. And I like horror movies and I haven't seen one of these in a while. So I really didn't have any, I hadn't even seen a trailer for it. I had seen the poster and that was about all the introduction I had to it. And the audience was jacked. Like they were plugged into this movie. It's one of those really great experiences where the audience is not there they're not better than the movie. They were just into it and they reacted as thus. And that's the best kind of horror or comedy experiences you can have when everyone decides, all right, it's not me time, it's movie time.
I have an amusing anecdote about seeing it at the theater. I went to go see it with with my then husband, who was not normally a horror fan, but for whatever reason went to go see us anyway. And as you say, the audience was very, very into it, and particularly the extremely memorable, extremely well done opening scene. But as we're getting towards the end of the movie, and I am going to spoil it for anybody who's listening to this, well, I'll partially spoil it.
Okay.
One of the killers is knocked out and presumed dead. And behind us are two young gentlemen who are whispering back and forth. Evidently, one of them had already seen it.
Oh.
And loudly whispered to the other one, "You know he's not dead, right?" And my then husband, who is a gentle but large man, turned around, said at the top of his lungs, "Will you shut up?" And we did actually get a little, smattering of Marine Todd applause in the theater.
He's my Batman.
Yeah, and he almost never, to this day, almost never raised his voice, but he had just kind of had it at that point, because there's a difference between yeah and woo and oh my god, a movie, and then talking about everything that's happening on the screen, and I will never forget that to the end of my days.
My father-in-law's wife is a very nice woman in a whole galaxy of respects, but she's also one of those people who can't seem to follow movies or television series or sporting events. Things happen, and it's like the first time she's ever seen drama. It's like she wandered into an amphitheater as Aristotle is putting on the production, and is like, wait a second, there's three people who walk around and tell us what's happening? Is that always what's going on? Is this regular? Is this regular? And she's always asking, now they're the killers, right? Are they supposed to be running away? Yes, they don't want to die. What it is about this that you find so confusing?
Why do they want to kill her? I don't know. I'm sure they'll tell us by the end of the movie.
There were some clues in the preceding hour and 15 minutes of this motion picture, but I don't want to tell you your business. Man.
That sounds like she's kind of for who Wikipedia plot descriptions are made for.
Yes, in many respects. Listen, you can get carried away in the visuals of a motion picture and lose details along the way, and not every film is so forthcoming with vital components of information that you need to follow along. But then again, the remake of The In-Laws was not one of those movies. And she was confused by every element inside of it. Just could not, for the life of her, follow the plot of this very simple remake buddy film.
Yeah, but I bet, God love her, I bet if he showed her like Lost Highway, she'd be like, oh yeah, I can tell you what happened with that.
No, this is exactly my speed.
How are you not following this? This is completely linear.
I mean, listen, it's going from point A to point B, and if you can't follow it, I don't know what to tell you. That guy doesn't have any eyebrows, and he can call himself. What do you want? Oh, Lost Highway. Oh, my goodness.
One of these days.
One of these
we'll
days,
both get really, really ripped and just try to talk about it like we're in college or something.
So, yeah, I think the other half of this donut, as you were, right, the hole in the donut, if we're going to go the Knives Out route, is Wes Craven, who up until this point had made a great name for himself in horror. He had obviously produced some genre classics and genuine classics. Like we've said, and for those who might not have caught up with those particular episodes, because people are always moving at their own pace and using the catalog to their own devices. But A Nightmare on Elm Street is not only a great horror movie, it is a great movie. It is fan-fucking-tastic.
I agree.
It's unbelievable. And after that, he had some stumbles, and we just talked about Shocker on the Patreon. And that, it has its moments, and it's definitely a movie worth watching. His aim there was to make a Freddy Krueger movie, not make another A Nightmare on Elm Street. So in that sense, it's very on target, but maybe not his scariest piece of cinema. And then he's trying to weave his political and philosophical messages into a lot of things. And while they're very, very good, they don't have the cultural impact of Nightmare. And so by the time he hits New Nightmare, he's finally been given a financial stake in it. He knows exactly the kind of movie he wants to make, which is a movie about how horror affects us, and is participating in making one, tangentially make you a participant in the horrors of the world, which is a big ask of an audience.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, it really, really works. I understand some that might feel it is overhyped or too cerebral or just misses the mark or isn't what they wanted in a meal. But right around this time, he has an interview where he's hyping New Nightmare. And an interviewer asked him, like, how do you feel about being one of these masters of horror where, people hear your name and they're expecting a certain type of film and you're known for all these scary movies. And you kind of see this flash in front of his face of regret. Like, he just can't believe, like, he's coming to the realization, oh yeah, I'm the horror guy. And even though I don't participate in the whole boobs and blood fair, I'm also a recipient of that audience. So whether or not I'm actually engaging in the kind of movies that I may not necessarily condone, I've made movies that gave those people those ideas.
Right, because certainly for 80s horror, there was always this juggernaut of Wes Craven, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper, that everybody just kind of glommed together and just assumed that they all made the same kind of movies.
Yes.
Even though certainly none of them really resorted to a lot of like gratuitous nudity or anything like that. I mean, they're certainly violent, but not in a way that I think particularly was misogynist or gratuitous, and in a way that so much 70s and 80s horror was.
Yeah. At this point, I think he's feeling like, I do need to break away from this. This has got to be my final statement on the subject. So when he's approached about what at the time was called Scary Movie, he's like, no way in hell. There's nothing about this that appeals to me. I'm not going back to that. Well, I've had my say. I'm certainly not doing a straight up slasher, because technically he had not done a straight up slasher. While Nightmare is in that vein, it's so phantasmagorical on top of it that it's its own animal, and really shifted the dynamic of that genre on its own, on that film's axis, to the point where Friday the 13th is grasping to catch up to where it was in the lead. Now it's way behind, and it finds itself falling to the wayside while Nightmare and Child's Play overtake the landscape of slashers. So he gets to Scream. He's like, no fucking way. But I think that ends up being the secret sauce of this movie. It's so well directed and so perfectly cast. The amount of gloss added to his odd casting choices in that perfect 90s way,
Oh my God. We could just dedicate this entire episode to Skeet Ulrich's hair.
Oh my God. It's a character unto itself.
And how he's got the perfect, like, anybody else, it would look like he's trying to do a Kubrick stare, because his head is constantly tilted downward. But it's just to get that hair in his eyes and look a little poetic. You kind of look like he doesn't care enough to get his hair out of his eyes, but he totally purposely puts his hair in his eyes.
Yes,
so it makes him look soulful.
It's that Tina Fey quote about Justin Bieber, that his hair just knows where it wants to go.
Exactly. He's got the T-shirt. Of course, when he was in this, everybody's like, oh, baby Johnny Depp. And again, he was cultivating that look, deliberately.
Yes. He wants people to view him through that lens, because he's doing a balancing act here as Billy, because, and honestly, so is Stu for Matthew Lillard.
When I saw the first movie as okay, I wasn't a teenager because I think we've established many times that we are really fucking old.
Yes.
I was like
the elder statesman of podcasting, I believe.
Yeah.
Is what
I guess I would have been 23 or 24 when this came out, depending on what month it was. But I found Matthew Lillard's character to be insufferable.
I agree. At the time, he's like doing a lot.
Yeah, he really is. He's for one thing, he's a little too old. Just a tap, a little too old to be a convincing high school student.
Yes,
and he's got this like very, very manic, I'm constantly on energy. And
I agree with you. And at the time, but upon this rewatch, I was really trying to see where the fulcrum point of their performances are. Because they have to do this thing where you can convincingly believe they're killers or they're just dumb teenagers. Right.
And they're obviously two sides of the same coin. You've got Billy, who's he's just cool. That's the only word I can think of. And then you've got Stu, who's very goofy. And so, neither of them could possibly be the killer. I mean, look at them, Billy has an alibi.
Yeah.
And Stu, that's ridiculous. Stu's like a big dumb kid.
He really is.
And now I'm like, oh, he's kind of adorable. Let me pinch your cheek. And I think I carry on again almost with the Henry Winkler thing where Matthew Lillard himself has endeared himself to me.
Yeah.
After a certain point. So I think this might have been the first thing I ever saw him in.
I think he found the lane that actually occupies both ends of it, where he now still is Matthew Lillard, but he's Matthew Lillard that you can buy walking around near human beings.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also knows how to play a character that isn't Matthew Lillard. And that's the one thing that I think he was so convincing as Matthew Lillard early on that he just arrived with that package and they're like, well, here's the Matthew Lillard spot. And that eventually, for almost everyone, wears very thin.
Right.
And he found a way to actually corner that into, no, this is a human being who still has that affectation, but it's not Matthew Lillard every second.
Right, exactly.
Now, let's go back to the very beginning here, right? And the opening of this movie with that font. Oh my God, there's no more 90s font than the Scream front title card here.
Well, I mean, there's no more 90s production company card than Dimension Films.
The less said about the two absolute raging, terrible asshole people who ran Dimension Films and conversely Miramax, the better. This is also this movie makes a particular monster out of this crew, because in the aftermath of it, they become convinced and they point at themselves, and I will not name them because I don't have a fucking desire to even give voice to their.
You can look it up. You can look it up on Wikipedia if you need to.
Yeah. If you want to, I promise you, they're terrible people. They point at themselves and anoint themselves the kings of horror. We know how to do horror. We are the horror people. If you want to do horror, we're doing it here, and we will tell you how to do it. And they go about fucking up, buying and hiding all sorts of horror movies over the course of the next 20 plus years. And they never are able to make a horror movie on the level of Scream again, primarily because they stick their fucking fingers in everything.
Right.
And with that, we wash our hands of that pair and we turn to the best producer that Scream ever encountered. You might know her better as the host of the Drew Barrymore Show. Why? It's Drew Barrymore. That's right. Drew Barrymore is the best producer of Scream ever.
And my only complaint about this entire movie is she's not wearing a great wig. It's not a good wig.
It's not a good wig.
But that's it. Other than that, I this is an almost flawless movie for me.
I will give them prompts for trying to differentiate all these white people, because we've encountered so many of these movies where it just seems like they come out of a mold press and you're like, I can't tell the difference between any of these people. They're just so homogenous in so many ways. And at least there's a bare attempt here to cast people who are all incredibly symmetrical, but also different from one another. So the deal with Drew Barrymore is that she was originally cast as Sydney. And the farther she got into the process, a couple of things happened. Her career took an incredible upturn, and she got busier and busier with higher and higher profile films, including films that she would produce personally. Secondly, as a result of that, her schedule was wildly out of control. And she looks at this thing and says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to kill off, I ought to switch characters to this cold open character. And you put me on the front of every poster. I don't care how you use my image. You can make me the face of it. You can make me one of many faces. It doesn't matter. So long as you give the audience the impression that I'm in this movie for the long haul. And that's exactly what they did. So when people showed up to the theater, they had no understanding that she would only be on screen for the opening of this film.
Yeah, and it's a perfect, and it's Psycho, basically.
Yes, it is. Psycho is the perfect comparison. Only they speed up the process from like half a movie to just the cold open. Janet Leigh's character is like someone we've learned information about. Like, we've seen her at work. We've seen her boyfriend. We know what her predicament is. We don't know dick about Casey. You know, she's a girl.
She fudges around a little bit and tells her the anonymous phone call she doesn't have a boyfriend when she does, which is a nice little dig at these kinds of movies punishing quote unquote bad girls.
Well, that is the other thing. There are a couple components here that make this film particularly prescient, but one of them is its relationship to misogyny. Like, there's a real actual dialogue in this film about how people in this town and men and boys in this town define themselves by defining women. It is wild. But let us get back specifically to Casey's character before we move on to that, because it's a pretty grand point. One of the things we establish about Casey is she feels very safe in the environment she's in. That house is gigantic, and there's about 12 ways into it.
Yeah. And
what you're seeing there is what I love in a good horror film, where you lay the groundwork by just watching, here you're watching an actor give a performance in what is essentially a monologue, a scene with someone they cannot see and they can't interact with. And it's her comfort level with where she's at that relaxes an audience and then lulls you into, oh, fuck, she's going to die. It's kind of crazy how well she accomplishes this task, given how wild an ask that it is.
Certainly, and again, in the BC era of not having caller ID on phones,
yeah.
It's kind of funny. Do you get to the point now, and it doesn't necessarily cut down on my enjoyment of watching old horror movies from 1996, but let's say pre 2000.
Yeah.
Horror movies. Do you ever think, now we have smartphones, that wouldn't happen anymore?
Yeah. It is weird how much that singular technology forces everyone to have to find a way around it. And the prevalent thing is the battery on my phone ran out, or I don't have any coverage here.
Right, but even the coverage thing, that's kind of becoming a thing of the past too. Like, you have to be like way, way, way out in the middle of nowhere to not even be able to get a single bar at this point.
Yes.
But my point being is that I'm not sure if the youth today, get the effectiveness of having no choice but to answer a phone because you don't know who it might be.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if this is how she is at her own home. Is she babysitting?
No,
So she really doesn't really have any particular reason to have to answer the phone, except assuming that it might be her parents checking in on her.
Right. She's just taking advantage of the fact that her parents are out for the evening, and then maybe she can get some light, over the clothes action on the couch while watching a scary movie until they come home.
Right.
So it's relatively innocent for the most part. And it is that thing of her being in, and that gets back to the sort of Ghostface tactic here. Coming back to your point, where they use that element of women have to be nice against them.
Right, exactly. I mean, she's trying to be a little flirty, and I mean, to me, I'm like, no, hang up the phone. Just hang up the phone. Please, God, hang up the phone. Don't pick it up again. But some people might be, kind of thinking, oh, it's fun. I was messing with this guy for a few minutes, and he's probably calling from another state or something.
Right.
And another anecdote when I saw it in the theater was when she goes, when she asks, why do you want to know my name? She says, because I want to know what I'm looking at. Like, the air just sucked out of the theater, like, like you could hear it. You're like, oh, shit.
And I think probably for our, again, we're laying this all at the feet, but I do wonder for the younger generations watching this movie, if they don't, somewhat akin to like Jaws, where all the tropes of shark movies are really referencing, like Jaws made that road. It didn't exist before. Like you would only have Moby Dick as a reference point before Jaws. So while now you go, well, of course the head's going to pop out of that boat, but you wouldn't have had that without Jaws. So
right.
So I have to feel like there's a lot of people who watch Scream and they're kind of like, really? Because they've seen the watered down versions, the reference points used that are originated here.
Right. I do. As great as this movie is, I do feel like if you're only just getting around to watching it now, that some of the impact is going to be a little bit lost. Because, like I said, I cannot emphasize enough that the early to mid 90s, and for me at least into the late 90s, was just tumbleweeds flowing around for horror. It just was not good. It really wasn't. And then this was just such a shot of juice. Just, somebody tried to revive this. And it took a little while to I think, really get back on its feet. But there's an appreciation there that it had been lacking for a while.
Very much so. And then, of course, because Hollywood then learns all the wrong lessons, they then take this, and it's the same thing with Clueless. I think Scream and Clueless are running on parallel tracks because they're both reviving youth genre films, and they do it so well. And everyone looks at it and go, we should hire pretty people from television.
Yeah, exactly. We should, we should hire them, just make no attempt to engage them with the audience, and then just have them all killed off immediately.
Yes.
And let's throw some CGI blood in there.
Yeah. Oh, fucking CGI blood. It's the worst. This one, of course, has the guts to actually have guts.
Oh, yeah. It's brutal.
It is brutal. Like, there is a lot going on in this cold open, and it all comes down to Drew Barrymore's performance and the ability to build an action sequence around suspense and payoff that isn't just jump scares. Although there are jump scares, like it's not a bad technique. You just can't only have cat scares. You can't only have closet doors. But when you use them the right way, like it's kind of magic, man. It's like anyone can make a hamburger, but you taste a really good one. You're like, fuck, why am I fucking around with these shitty hamburgers?
Exactly.
This is prime K&B effects group stuff. Like the blood looks like blood. The guts look like guts. And because you inherently like Drew Barrymore, you don't want to see her die. Like, I don't give a fuck about Steve. Steve looks like a load, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, Steve doesn't even. Steve gets like a few like grunts through a taped mouth. He doesn't get to. He doesn't get to say much.
Listen, I don't know exactly what I would do in this situation, but there's a lot of looking like through his eyes, like, why are you doing this to me at Drew Barrymore? When it's like, well, she's not the one fucking doing it to you, dude. Why
don't you know it's Mrs. Voorhees? I mean, come on. If you let me down like that, I mean, I would definitely be looking at you pleadingly before I get gutted right in front of you.
But when his guts pour out, like that's real. That's visceral. And apparently that's what earned, that and Drew Barrymore being hung up on a tree, which talk about Friday the 13th references. How the fuck do either of those teens hoist her up
while her parents are looking around the house for her?
They're so busy with like their curb appeal. Like, oh, I love how these are coming in. They're beautiful. I love this pantsuit. Let's have a martini.
Why is our house filled with smoke?
It's Casey. They're a little slow on the uptake. I do wish they kind of at least pointed to like maybe they're drunk, because that would explain a lot of their reactions.
And of course, I'm thinking of Student Bodies. The dad buys a piece of chicken and tapes it back together. Again, Student Bodies, 2/3 of the greatest movie ever made, let down by the last third. They're just slowly, painstakingly making their way upstairs to find the dead body.
Constantly touching gum. Who put all this gum here? Listen to Student Bodies, everybody. Watch Student Bodies.
It's so good. I love it.
When anyone else brings up Student Bodies, I just lay out the talking during Horsehead Bookends. And I'll answer the phone. I'm the farthest from the room. I'm the farthest one from it.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Like, this is such a fucking throwaway. Oh, God. Student Bodies. So, yeah, how they hoist her up there is beyond me. We're 40 minutes into this. We have not moved past the cold open. We're in blank check territory here. We're not even doing the whole movie. I love that this entire sequence is timed by that Jiffy Pop. Like, it's genius that the tension expands as the Jiffy Pop builds and gets hotter and hotter, and the steam's coming out the top, and it's bulging. Now it's smoking. Now it's on fire. Now the stove is on fire. Now the kitchen is on fire. Like, oh my God, it's great because it's telling you that things are increasing beyond the mere she's being chased by a maniac killer who, up until this point could just be fooling up until the point Steve gets gutted. Or is that a joke? You don't know. Are you in an April Fool's Day situation?
Right, exactly.
Highly recommend. Maybe not as much as Student Bodies. What God graced us for motion pictures.
I think that Scream is by far the much more competently made movie, but Student Bodies makes me laugh more.
Sure. In terms of pure comedic displays, yeah, Student Bodies. Well, Student Bodies is also trying harder. Like, it's a machine gun. This is a sniper.
Right, exactly. That's
when it comes to jokes. Let's talk about really what we're here to talk about, and that is the world's biggest Indigo Girls fan, Sidney Prescott. I was hoping that we were going to get a weird detail in a teenager's bedroom, and boy, did we get it. I mean, listen, I love Indigo Girls. You love Indigo Girls. Does Sydney love Indigo Girls?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what a teenager in 1996 would have been into, and I don't think it was the Indigo Girls.
Maybe she was just into folk rock revivals.
I mean, I could see Fiona Apple. I could see certainly see Tori Amos. I don't know about the Indigo Girl. That's going to be a hard sell for me.
It would be, but I also think a lot of those things are cresting right at the moment that this movie's being made, because like Shadow Boxer is like released like that year. It is very, very close. Maybe it's 94. Is Shadow Boxer 94?
No, it's 96, I think.
Really?
I think so.
Man, I was ahead of the fucking curve on that one. But yeah, Tori Amos, all of that stuff is very, because in 97, you would have gone, oh, there's a whole host of acts that she would have been into more than Indigo Girls. But also, if you're a teenager of that age, like maybe it's a concert that her mom took her to. You don't really know. Like,
that's true.
And of course, we get to see something I love to see in movies, want to see in more movies: nightgowns. Love nightgowns.
I mean, yeah, she's wearing a granny gown. I have no problem with that. They're very comfy.
And yeah, she's doing homework on that primordial computer.
That green on black computer.
That we will learn is hooked up to the internet so that she might make phone calls to 911 on it.
Yeah, I remember one. I was like, "Wait, can you do that?"
I'm trying to remember. It's our friend from My Neighbors Are Dead. His favorite thing was like watching the net and going, "Man, one of these days I'm going to be able to order pizza over the internet." Like, can you imagine? Will it ever get any better than that? Into this scene, we have Billy, and he arrives with a pitch. His penis.
So somebody posted on Twitter the other day a really great thing. It said all boyfriends in horror, like, you've been such a bitch ever since your mom died yesterday. And that is definitely a trope.
It really is.
You've got Scream. You've got a big one for more recent, Midsommar.
Mm-hmm.
Where like her entire family is decimated, and he's just like, I don't know why I just can't get over this. It's been 3 months.
I mean, come on.
Since your sister murdered your parents, then killed herself.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, what do you do? Do you expect me to comfort you? I mean, my God, I'm just your boyfriend.
Yeah, like I know you're hurting. You know who else is hurting? My penis. It's feeling very neglected. Thank you very much.
What about me and my penis's needs?
Listen, I'm being comforting. I feel your pain, but also I'd like you to feel my penis at various stages and maybe all the way up into completion. Like, we could start there. This brings up a question because we've never danced around spoilers before, so I don't know why we would do that. Now, if you've reached this point,
this movie is almost 25 years old. Come on now, what are you waiting for?
It is time for you to watch Screen. Pause it, come back. That's how electronics work. We're still going to be here. Rate, review, and subscribe. Gina works for the Spool. We're on Twitter. You know all that stuff. Like, come back to us, watch Scream, and then come back. So here we go. We learned that Billy has killed Sydney's mom. So did he think that would be an entree to getting laid 24/7? Because that is amongst the dumbest fucking ideas I've ever heard in my life.
I mean, clearly he got the idea, the impression somewhere that if you're, what's she supposed to be, like 16 maybe? That your 16-year-old girlfriend, her mother is horrendously murdered and raped.
Yes.
Let's not mention that. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
That she will want to do it more. I'm like, I guess. I mean, that's not my. I mean, death is not my primary motivator, but I guess it works for some people. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why he felt that would, quote unquote, loosen her up or whatever his little spiel is. When he goes, we started out at an R and we were headed to NC-17, and now I feel like we're just kind of edited for television.
And then your mom died, and what about my penis, Sydney?
Just might remind you, my penis is still very committed to this relationship, but you don't seem committed at all to my penis. And so that comes back to this movie's relationship to women and how all of the men in it automatically attribute a very defined lane to any woman they encounter. They are either the girlfriend or just a girl, or she's only hot because she's on television, or, she's a slut. And it's like, what we gotta get off this fucking slut thing. It is so ill-defined. It just doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Well, yeah, and certainly that is very particularly lands when we get on the subject of Sydney's mother, who apparently liked to sleep around.
Yeah,
which you probably shouldn't do that in a small town because people tend to notice those kind of things and talk about it. That's why they have no-tell motels, as they're called. Like, do they still call them that? I guess. Like out on the highway. You don't just bounce around from person to person in your tiny little town, right? Sleeping with these people, but people are kind of almost about to say that she had it coming, and I don't mean just Billy, because again, as a spoiler, Sydney's mom was sleeping with Billy's dad at some point. Yes. But I mean, her closest friend Tatum, we haven't gotten to yet, because she is played by a crazy person.
A crazy person who was partially made crazy.
Well, so yes, that's
it's not it's not 100% on her.
That ties back into the terrible people involved in producing this movie. But we won't get into that because that's a bummer. But even she's kind of like, well, yeah. People are talking. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. And it's like, well, then why did you bring it up? And Sydney is just kind of chill about it. Like, yeah, I've had this conversation with people already plenty of times, and she's like, I'm not even going to dignify it with a response.
Well, she can't do anything about it, and the only person who could possibly actually defend against it or admit to it was brutally murdered. So she's left with the aftermath. I mean, this comes down to one of my grand theories on slasher movies in particular, in that it is from the standpoint of youth is scary, that young people will outlive you. They have the power of time on their side. And now, in the 90s, they have fucking cable. It's the worst. It's a terrible combination. And so, because they have that power of almost immortality in comparison to anyone older than them, that is a part of the horror that comes across, particularly in the late 90s. Because here's another old person note. Just put Grandpa Simpson yells at cloud right here. When the Berlin Wall fell, America is kind of left without a faceless other to project all its fears on. And so everyone immediately turns on each other and they start aiming anything they got at anyone near them. In my estimation, this is why Scream and X-Files captured that moment in time, because the enemy is no longer on the other side of the world anymore. In order to create fear and shit, politicians and the media have to start pointing the finger at right next to you. Oh my God, you live next door to pure evil. And America, being America, fucking freaks out at a moment in time which they're no longer under nuclear threat.
And we still, unfortunately, have that mindset of you have to be constantly watching what your neighbors are doing.
Yes.
For a while after 9/11, we came together and watched what our brown neighbors were doing. So that was a good moment for America. Yeah. We really we came together to be as racist as possible. Yes. And then everything fell apart again. Now we're just kind of pointing fingers at each other.
Is one of those things we're going to have to fucking get past. People are basically, it comes down to their actions and their active support. If it's words, an active support of evil, yeah, you're going to get painted with that fucking brush. I think this movie is prescient as hell, because in addition to this component, you also have the weaponized geekery of Randy.
It kind of crosses over with our Fade to Black episode.
Oh, I mean, this was perfect. It could not have been more perfect that you put these things back to back. I'm not a genius. The cards just laid out that way from the tarot deck.
Well, basically, Eric Binford would have been, Randy would have been Eric Binford. He didn't have any friends.
Yes. And when Hollywood learns the wrong lesson, I think there's a lot of movie fans who also learned the wrong lessons of Randy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they don't get that the movie is making fun of him. No. and I, of course, I watched it thinking, do I act like that? Until I should go home, get my finest engraved stationery, and write my heart. I am so heartily sorry for judging your movie choices.
And I mean, I know I've taken the hit of saying it's okay to like a movie and that it's okay if you like something that I don't and I do and I don't like something you do. Like it's okay. Like there's enough movies.
Oh,
it's
there was
fun.
definitely a time where I was like that.
Yeah.
And I can't say for certain that this kind of snapped me out of it. But I don't think it was definitely something in my early 20s that I got over by the time I was in my late 20s. So clearly that, there's some sort of that was, some, part of it could be attributed to that because he was treated like such a, not a buffoon, but just somebody who's just very obnoxious and doesn't really seem to have much of a personality. Oh, then he's kind of a hanger on.
Yeah.
You desperately wanting any crumb of affection Sydney can throw at him. And
the fact that he calls Stu a lapdog, which is both accurate and projection.
Right. But doesn't he doesn't know how to speak at anything but like movie references. Yes. Which again, as we mentioned in Fade to Black, is something a lot of people still do now. In fact, I would say it's worse than ever with the advent of the internet, where that's like your entire personality.
It goes part and parcel with memes.
I direct you to hashtag film Twitter, for instance.
Randy is fucking hashtag film Twitter.
Yeah.
He is film Twitter on two
he's got so many hot takes, man. Oh. So many hot takes. He loves those unpopular opinion memes.
Yes, he does.
And his opinions are always unpopular.
Everywhere he goes, cartoon swords are aimed at his face. And they should be. And one of them should put him out of his misery. And luckily, Scream 2 has the guts to do it. Spoilers for Scream 2. We're in the spoiler zone, baby. He shouldn't have lived, frankly.
He shouldn't have lived.
He just shouldn't have lived.
But I feel like that's playing with the audience's expectation, though.
Yes.
Where, he's kind of he and Stu kind of, play the same, jokester role. Mm-hmm. But normally in movies like that, he would have been killed probably pretty early on.
No, he should have gone like almost immediately.
But he wasn't. Which I think is something that the audience did not expect to see happen.
Yeah, and then because they're keeping him around for those fucking horror rules, and we'll get to decimating the stupid fucking horror rules that this movie put into people's heads. Because Jesus fucking Christ, I saw another one saying like when sexually active teens, go down to the lake and the Jason's like, oh, I'm going to head on over there. I'm like, fucking, they're not teens. God damn it. Watch the movies. Just try them. Try watching them. They are commercially available. Oh, and see, and there I go. Now I'm Randy. Now I'm that guy. Like, I'm surprised that incels haven't latched onto Ghostface as an icon. Because it's so part and parcel of how I deserve, like, we're going back to, have you considered my penis territory? And it all comes down to that. Like, they're all of them are waiting for their penis to be recognized as the best one in the room. And why haven't you touched it yet? I mean, your mom died over a year ago.
Get over it.
Jesus Christ. Man,
look,
I can't be the only one touching my penis in this relationship, and I'm touching it all the time.
Imagine like actually saying that to a person in real life.
I don't know.
You've been mourning your parent for too long.
Oh my
Your brutally murdered parent, who you might have seen actually get killed in front of you, or certainly the aftermath.
Yes, like you were minutes away from maybe being able to call the police or trying to do something. Like, she is carrying around with her a lot of guilt, and then taking on everything that everyone else says about her mother, which brings us to the only woman in this motion picture, or character for that matter, with the audacity to wear a neon green suit. And then it's Gail motherfucking Weathers.
Oh, God, she's so loathsome. So loathsome.
And so joyful about it. Like, there's a glee to what's happening.
Her horrible little choppy bangs.
Well, they'll only get choppier, Gina. Let's not jump the gun. This may be her best hair in the entire franchise.
She's like Freddie Lounds and Hannibal level loathsome.
Yes, but I feel like there's the other component that sort of rises above the Freddie Loundzes of the world is that Courtney Cox is a gifted fucking comedian. And she nails lines just left and right like a goddamn assassin. She just kills it over and over and over again. And it makes you vacillate between this person is hateful, this person is wrong, manipulative, just the scum of the earth. But also, she makes me laugh. And that's her razor blade to ride in this thing. And she does a great fucking job at hating her. Like, that is not just a byproduct of the script and the direction. It is an active choice that she is making in this film.
Right. I mean, she does it well, because holy shit.
At one point, she's confronted by Sydney. She's like, basically, you put an innocent man in jail because you couldn't confront the fact that your mom was sleeping around town. That's what it comes down to. And she's like, you may want to consider like that you were wrong and you did a terrible thing. A terrible thing happened to you, but you also did a terrible thing. And she's so giddy that she finally got to say this to Sydney. And she's like, oh my God, maybe these murders are connected. I can get an innocent man off a death row. And then it cuts to the cameraman who's like, oh my God, we're going to get to do a good thing. And then Courtney Cox looks him dead in the eye and goes, do you know what that will do for my book sales? And it's just perfect. It's perfectly edited. It's perfectly laid out. It's nailed in performance. I can't get enough of Courtney Cox in this movie. Honestly, I think it both created and killed a movie career for her, because I'm not sure you can see her in the movie screens on the same level of this, because this allows her to do so much, and so many movies would have forced her to be a wife, a girlfriend.
Right. And again, subverting audience expectations, she survives to the end of this.
Spoiler alert. Oh my God. The line, it's called tact, you fuck rag. You put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, this kind of plays around a little bit with, would these people actually be friends in real life?
Yeah. But then again, I mean, Gina, I had a reasonably healthy group of friends towards the latter half of my high school years. But coming out of middle school and into high school, I was friends with genuine fucking assholes because for some reason they tolerated me enough until the point where they said, we don't hang out with you anymore. Just like sophomore year, they're like, I don't want to fucking see your face.
We all get fired from our friends group sometimes.
Best thing that ever happened to me. Can't say it wasn't painful, but you know what? I needed to learn that I was a bit of a Randy, and 2, that I could have other friends, and that allowed me that for the rest of my life, I could go, you know what? Maybe I'll make other friends. And every time I have, it is pretty much paid off. But the assholes in high school exist. Like, it's not rocket science. But there is an element to some of these lines that if Kevin Williamson writes it and you go, oh, he's a bit too witty by half. And Diablo Cody writes it, and it's like, well, that no human being on Earth.
Well, my main issue is I don't think everybody seems to be like shockingly insensitive to the fact that her mother was murdered. Like,
it's
everybody.
Been a year. Everyone's got their penis in quotes that they're waiting for Sydney to touch here. And just get past the
But like everybody is just sort of, dismissive of it. And certainly people her age. And I don't know if like when I was a teenager, I don't think I've never, was close to anyone who experienced that level of loss. And I don't know, maybe kids are just kind of weird sort of assholes about that kind of thing. And they don't actually know, like, tact and sensitivity, but everybody's like, oh, this is just like, oh, wait, you're standing right there. I'm sorry. And it's like, it's not that hard for you to not constantly bring this up to her.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, I mean, that is something, we talked about, to go back to another one, is Scream for Help.
Yeah.
When like her best friend gets turned to road pizza right in front of her. and her parents were like, oh, that's a shame. Well, we have to go out to the Rotary Club dinner, so you just order yourself some Chinese for dinner or something. You good? You don't need us here? Okay, I realize you experienced a horrific trauma, but we've got some like glad handing we have to do.
Yeah, honestly, like these used cars aren't going to sell themselves. We gotta get out of the house.
But everybody's like, yeah, that's sad, and that's Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Yes.
Their classmate gets murdered, everybody goes to school the next day. Yes. It's like, wait, don't you all usually close schools for a day?
At least this
like
movie has the wherewithal that when bodies start piling up early on, they're like, we should not have people come back to school. This is obviously not a safe space.
So I feel like that might even a pointed observation about that trope, and that nobody handles these situations like actual compassionate human beings.
Yes. Well, and it's also serving a different master here, and one that it should be discussed, which is this movie is not only going back to slashers, but specifically whodunit slashers, which was a real thing early on. And Halloween is not that. Halloween is a pure thriller in which you see through a killer's eyes and he's coming for you and you're trying to outwit him. It's straight up wait until dark. Whereas when you start getting into the 80s and you hit Friday the 13th, and this movie name checks it, Prom Night.
Oh yeah, totally.
And Happy Birthday to Me, one of our favorites. It's definitely in the vein of whodunit. The Initiation is another one that's a huge whodunit, Sweet 16. And most of them are bad at red herrings. And I think what this movie is trying to do is course correct on that, which is to say that if someone is a terrible person, it makes you more likely to think they have it within them to be the killer here. The problem with using Prom Night as a point is it both makes Randy right in that it is an attempting to be a whodunit slasher, but also wrong because Prom Night is great at creating red herrings and terrible at paying any of that shit off.
Right, exactly.
It's just the worst at it. And it spends the vast majority of its runtime setting up people who will never pay off, including Leslie Nielsen, who dances the herky-jerky like his limbs don't fully attach to his body to disco music, and then we never see his ass again. It turns out, spoiler for Prom Night, his fucking kid's the killer. He doesn't even show up at the end.
Yeah, and you barely remember who he was, so it's like you really have to strain hard, and then it's like, oh, right, it's that guy.
Yeah. Up until this point, he's just the weird brother who watches his sister get dressed in her bra. Like, all right, there's comfortable. And then there's like, you don't want to, like, if you're looking at Jamie Lee Curtis in a bra, like, that's going to pull your attention. Like, allow her to dress, asshole. That's my hot take on Prom Night. The movie in which you will believe that Jamie Lee Curtis went bra shopping. So my question here when it comes to, because we could go through the whole, action sequence here of Sydney being attacked in her house, which is, again, another gigantic home in which she says, idiots run up the stairs when they should be running out the door, and then runs up the stairs because the door's fucking blocked. And then you have the setup for the closet door, both upstairs and down. When she opens the closet door, nothing's there during the daytime. And then at night, when she comes back in from the porch, that's where Ghostface has been hiding this entire time. And it establishes her as being physically capable of fighting back, and Ghostface physically capable of getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell this is not a supernatural being. He falls down, he takes a hit, he lets a little grunts and ouches and all when he gets hit.
I think that's goddamn genius. Honestly, groundbreaking. Because there's so much of this genre that is built upon someone who cannot feel pain. They're all Michael Myers'
or they're like a variation on the backwoods mutant.
Yes. Or they're such criminal geniuses that they're never ever touched or detected. And here it's like, well, this guy almost got caught by parents. Like, this guy almost gets caught by Dewey, like the worst fucking cop on the face of the planet.
Oh, I love Dewey.
I will admit that I am perhaps not David Arquette's greatest, fan. That being said, there's a real piece of acting being done here where he accepts the role that he's been given. And he is trying to make a meal out of it, to the point in which his sister's like, "You're a fucking dork." And he's like, you remember what Mom said, "When I wear this badge, you treat me like a man." That's a line in this movie.
I like that's my superior. The janitor's your superior.
Oh my God. It's great. It's spoiler alert. We like this movie.
Yeah. If you don't want to hear us gushing over something, you might want to skip over the next couple episodes.
Don't download them and just don't listen to them.
Exactly. Yeah. We still need the numbers, but you don't have to listen if you I don't know, people seem to go either way. People either love when we just rip into something, or they don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah,
podcast listeners are a fickle bunch.
They are. And 4 years into this, we still don't know what makes a great kill by kill movie. It's another real mystifying
we all know the answer. The answer is fear no evil. But our listeners said, "Yeah, no, we're good. No. We don't have any interest in this obscure 1981 demonic possession movie."
In which the devil wears a nightgown and a man develops boobs and kills himself.
Sorry. When you put it that way, it sounds stupid. Starring the brother of Nellie Olson.
Oh my God. That movie is fantastic. If you love Mikey, you will love Fear No Evil. I promise you. Check it out. What were we talking about again? Oh, yeah, Scream.
A movie many people enjoyed.
Yes.
Yeah, I double checked. This was released in fucking December.
Oh yeah, this was
the audacity of releasing a slasher movie during the holiday season. That I love it. I love it.
And this is one of those movies that landed in theaters and pulled like $23 million. And people are like, whoa, that's counter programming. Like, all of a sudden, teens and young adults are like, well, I don't want to see a Santa movie,
Like literally a week before Christmas,
yes.
it was released.
And people are like, I'd much rather see what seems to be a cool horror movie. And it built. It's one of those movies like Titanic a year later, where it would continue to make a set amount of money, where it just weekend after weekend after weekend, it would just make double digits amount of money.
Well, also it really sustained itself. And again, the internet was around, but not the thing it is today. Not nearly.
So many people didn't have access to it. Even
right. It still depended largely on literal, telling other people with your human mouth that you should go see this movie called Scream.
Or if you're the devil kid from Fear No Evil, your inhuman mouth, whatever mouth you have access.
You can do that too. Or if you're Danny Torrance, your finger.
Have you watched The Haunting of Bly Manor? It's so heartfelt. There's been Danny Torrance reviews, our new bit on Kill by Kill. Ratchet
Netflix
is overrated trash.
Just Netflix written backwards and on the door.
Danny, you have to know how to control The Shining. You also have to know that you can access Peacock even without a subscription. You just have to watch commercials. So, oh my God. If you were waiting for our minds to be broken, It happened. It happened in a movie. The movie is not breaking our minds. We're breaking each other's.
So 2020 it has a lot to do with that too.
Yeah, that has a lot.
We laugh to keep from screaming. we are currently recording this in favor of so we do not have to be forced to watch the vice presidential debate.
Yes, which I hope is going well for one person, and I hope that dickhead who calls his own wife mother is just really soiling himself right now. It's probably a middling affair, but I won't get into that. Let's talk about someone who makes the most of their opportunity, and that is the cheerleader in the bathroom. Leonora Scleffo, I believe her name. She was in 3 movies, including this one. And she gives a 2-minute monologue that why didn't she have a fucking career? Like, that's good acting. That's a memorable little bit that she's doing there. She's good at it. Like, I want to see more of this woman. Why was I denied? Then again, talented actresses giving up on the business after appearing in a Miramax / Dimension film. Not unusual. And regrettably. Boots is a clue. We haven't seen Boots as a clue since Friday the 13th. Like, that's a deep fucking cut.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
It's just not, we don't see it every day. We completely missed,
Were they weren't calling them Easter eggs back then, were they?
Yeah, no. I think we're on the verge of Easter eggs. Okay. I can remember that term being used on a certain website also run by a sex maniac. There's just a lot of fucking sex maniacs, right? There's just too fucking many.
Yeah, it's a problem.
It really fucking is. All right. So let's talk about someone who is an impeccable human being. I'm sure he has faults, but I've never been party to them. Henry Winkler, in his denouement, he announces to the entire school that there will be a curfew put in place at 9 p.m. tonight. It's a very interesting line reading. He will go on to be murdered in his own office, but not before we get to see Wes Craven in a Freddy Krueger sweater. And I'm just going to come right out and say this. We don't need that.
No, that's a little... We also kind of didn't need Casey saying that, the first Nightmare on Elm Street was good, the rest of them all sucked. Yeah, Wes, we know. We know, Wes.
Yeah. They ripped you off. I agree. They stole your money. I agree. But that's a little too meta and a little too, Eric Idle elbowing you in the side. Yeah. It's like, I know I'm watching a satire. I get that. Do you know he didn't make any money on it? Again, that was Australian. All of my fucking accents are Australian.
Do you know the rest of the movies weren't as critically acclaimed as the first one? Do you know that? Ever diminishing returns.
It's a real poke in the eye. Again, Australian. My God. They're different accents. They're literally different accents. My apologies to all the nations of the planet. Really enjoyed a component of this movie that I know the reason why it went away, but I just enjoyed revisiting that. And that is that everyone in this movie is not dressed in skin suits.
This looks very 90s. Yes. Like how most of the boys are wearing like shirts or sweaters that are like 3 sizes too big for them.
They're layered. They're layering. Like, if you told an actor that you need to layer in the scene, they're like, fuck, are you crazy? Like, the only time that's happened in recent memory is, again, Knives Out. Then everyone was, like, fascinated with the clothing choices. It's like, yeah, because everyone's not wearing a goddamn skin suit. Like, I don't need to see every ripple on everyone's body all the time. Like, leave some mystery. And listen, I want to see it sometimes. I just don't want to see it all the time. And this movie allows people to, mainly with the exception of Tatum, dress like human beings. But then again, Tatum, it doesn't like, she's wearing a half belly, football shirt with these giant red pants with a white stripe. Like, it wasn't out of place for 1996.
No,
like,
definitely not that whole like Gwen Stefani thing. Yeah, that's I mean, there's a later scene where her nipples are prominently on display, but the way that shot is, that's the joke, that she's got these, comically round. I mean, I don't know if the actress herself has the boob job, but the character is, her breasts look a little artificial.
Yeah.
And I think that's on purpose.
Yes, I do. I believe it is knowing, but it is also aimed at tittillating. Right. So Henry Winkler gets. I think that I'm
so sad by that. I'm so sad. And we get that great shot of the Ghostface's reflection in his eye. That's pretty gnarly.
I mean, this movie really plays at being glossy without becoming overly fake. And it also does something which, like at night, things are lit. Obviously the moon is overnaturally bright here, but also there are shadows, and it uses those shadows to foment unease. And very few people know how to do this. And this is where I think Wes Craven graduates from great director potential to great director.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, he can do humor elements. He can do suspense. He can do mystery. Yeah, definitely. This covers all of that. And how many slasher movies do you know have a Nick Cave song on the soundtrack?
Well,
this might have actually been the movie that kind of triggered me discovering Nick Cave.
You didn't hear it in the X-Files? Because it was big in the X-Files.
Oh, when did that soundtrack come out? That
had to have been 94, 95.
Oh, maybe that was it. It's somewhere in that time period.
Yes.
But that was also, Red Right Hand was a song of his I particularly liked.
And it's not like they played it on the X-Files and then everyone started playing it on the radio. It was that time where its legend grew, and then this one puts it over to the top, to the point where you ever hear Red Right Hand again, you automatically think of Scream.
Right, exactly.
This is such a template for so many things, and I can't wait to talk about more of it. But listen, we're already well into it, and there's a reason why we split these movies up, because like, I could talk about them forever, but I want to keep everyone's attention. I also want to give them a hook. So when we come back next time, we're going to talk about a party that someone should call the fucking cops on.
Yeah, probably. And again, it almost feels like a obviously unintentional parallel to current events.
Yes.
People just, putting themselves in danger because they got to partay.
Oh my God, Gina, you're 1,000% right.
And why it's so uncomfortable today to watch something like that.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so weird. It's so wacky. This movie is so fucking good.
It is.
Like,
it's
if you've
great.
seen Scream before and this is, like, I don't need to watch it again. Like, watch it again. I was slightly fearful that it would not come across or would feel too dated, or I would get wrapped up in its 90-ness, or there would be some element that I just couldn't get past. And not at all. It's still fucking magic. It's just magic to me.
And that thing with the whole the opening scene being timed to making the popcorn. Yeah. That's fucking brilliant. I mean, that's like, how do you even decide to do that? That is amazing. I love real time shit.
Oh my God, it's so good. I mean, again, to get back to the Wes Craven director thing, like, he's always but he's like interpreting his own stuff constantly. And the end results like depend on his ability to translate these very complex ideas and philosophies into action. And here he's been given a script and they're like, just make this come to life. And he's like, you know what? I can do that. I'm going to do the fuck out of that. And he does. It is like everything about this movie exhibits the same amount of control and expertise and focus that allows you to just enter the space of the characters and wonder why they're doing this and doing that without going, no one on earth would do that. And that's a real fine line to be able to do that. It just does it wonderfully.
It's great. I can't other than Drew Barrymore's wig, I cannot find a single thing wrong with this movie.
Well, Again, wig technology, strangely enough, hasn't gotten any better. But we'll revisit that next time. Of course, next week on the podcast, we're going back to Hannibal. I don't know who the killer of the week is, but it's getting good. Every single one's better than the last one, baby. And of course, we'll be back the week after that with the second half of Scream. Our apologies for not having a guest. Unfortunately, they had to drop out at the very last minute, but we will be back with a guest next week that I think everyone will be excited about. And Gina, we could play. Do you want to play Choose Your Own Death Venture, or should we wait and do a grand guignol? Because we only got two.
I mean, everybody's mostly gotten stabbed in this so far. So I mean, it's not much variety. I mean, I think that Casey was found hung, but I think the stabbing is kind of what killed her. I think the hanging was just for presentation purposes.
So yeah, let's wait and do a movie-wide Choose Your Own Death Venture. But before we go, where can people find you on these here internets?
I am a writer and I do some editing over at The Spool. That's thespool.net. By the time this goes up, I will have covered quite a few films at the Nightstream Film Festival, which is a combination of the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, Overlook Horror Film Festival, and a couple other regional festivals are all doing everything online because of the COVID.
Sure.
And I am on Twitter under Porcelain72.
Do it today, people. Check it out. You can find us on Twitter at KillByKillPod, where we have the Facebook group where we get to talk more in depth on things. Please rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get podcasts. Google now has a podcast app as well. It helps us be seen and heard by more people. I know we say this every week, but it is absolutely true. Believe you me, I was surprised as anyone that we were number 13 in Australia a mere week ago. I don't know why that happened, but it was delightful to find out.
They love your accent.
That's right. Listen, someone does the worst Australian accent of all time, and they're like, well, I gotta listen to this. So don't worry, folks. The body count will continue. So for myself and for Gina, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.